Good evening, everyone. This is Cynthia with cynscraftingworld. Sorry I didn't read last night. I completely forgot about it because I was so busy with other things. However, I shall continue reading tonight. The Werewolf. Straight on towards the farm. Surprised and anxious grew Christian that a prowling wolf should dare so near. He drew his knife and pressed on, more hastily, more keen-eyed. Oh, that tear were with him. Straight on, even to the very door where the snow failed. His heart seemed to give a great leap and then stop. There the track ended. Nothing lurked in the porch, and there was no sign of return. The firs stood straight against the sky, the clouds lay low, for the wind had fallen and a few snowflakes came drifting down. In horror of surprise, Christian stood dazed a moment. Then he lifted the latch and went in. His glance took in the old familiar forms and faces, and with them that of the stranger, fur-clad and beautiful. The awful truth flashed upon him. He knew what she was. Only few were startled by the rattle of the latch as he entered. The room was filled with bustle and movement, for it was the supper hour, when all the tools were laid aside and trestles and tables shifted. Christian had no knowledge of what he said and did. He moved and spoke mechanically, thinking that soon he must awake from this horrible dream. Sven and his mother supposed him to be cold and dead tired, and spared all unnecessary questions. And he found himself seated beside the hearth, opposite that dreadful thing that looked like a beautiful girl, watching her every movement, curdling with horror to see her fondle the child Rahl. Sven stood near them both, intent upon White Fels also, but how differently. She seemed unconscious of the gaze of both, neither aware of the child dread in the eyes of Christian, nor of Sven's warm admiration. These two brothers, who were twins, contrasted greatly despite their striking likeness. They were alike in regular profile, fair brown hair, and deep blue eyes. But Sven's features were perfect as the young god's, while Christian showed faulty details. Thus the line of his mouth was set too straight, the eyes shelved too deeply back, and the contour of the face flowed in less generous curves than Sven's. Their height was the same, but Christian too was slender for a perfect proportion, while Sven's well-knit frame, broad shoulders, and muscular arms made him preeminent for manly beauty as well as for strength. As a hunter, Sven was without rival, as a fisher without rival. All the countryside acknowledged him to be the best wrestler, rider, dancer, singer. Only in speed could he be surpassed, and only that only by his younger brother. All others Sven could distance fairly, but Christian could outrun him easily. Aye, he could keep pace with Sven's most breathless burst, and talk the while. Christian took little pride of his fleetness of foot, counting a man's leg to be the least worthy of his members. He had no envy of his brother's athletic superiority, though to several feats he had made a moderate second. He loved as only a twin can love, proud of all that Sven did, content with all that Sven was, humbly content also that his own great love should not be so exceedingly returned, since he knew himself to be so far less love-worthy. Christian dared not, in the midst of women and children, launch the horror that he knew into words. He waited to consult his brother, but Sven did not or would not notice the signal he made, and kept his face away, always turned towards White Fell. Christian drew away from the hearth, unable to remain passive with that dread upon him. "Where is Tyr?" he said suddenly. Then, catching sight of the dog in the distant corner, Why is he chained there? He flew at the stranger, one answered. Christian's eyes glowed. Yes, he said interrogatively. He was within an ace of having his brain knocked out. Tyr? Yes, she was nimbly up with the little axe she has at her waist. It was well for old Tyr that his master throttled him off. Christian went without a word to the corner where Tyr was chained. The dog rose up to meet him, as piteous and as indignant as a dumb beast can be. He stroked the black head. Good Tyr, brave dog. They knew then only the man and the dumb dog had comfort of each other. Christian's eyes turned again towards White Fell. Tears also, and he strained against the length of the chain. Christian's hand laid on the dog's neck, and he felt a ridge and bristle with quivering of impotent fury. Then he began to quiver in like manner with a fury born of reason, not instinct, as impotent morally as was Tyr's physically. Oh, the woman's form that he dare not touch, anything but that, and he with Tyr would be free to kill or be killed. Then he returned and to ask fresh questions. How long has the stranger been here? She came about half an hour before you. Who opened the door to her? Sven. No one else dared. The tone of the answer was mysterious. Why? Queried Christian. Has anything strange happened? Tell me. For answer he was told in the low undertone of the summons at the door, thrice repeated without human agency, and of Tyr's ominous howls, and of Sven's fruitless watch outside. Christian turned towards his brother in a torment of impatience for a word apart. The board was spread, and Sven was leading White Fell to the guest's place. This was more awful. She would break bread with them under the roof tree. He started forward and, touching Sven's arm, whispered in urgent entreaty. Sven stared and shook his head in angry impatience. Thereupon Christian would take no morsel of food. His opportunity came at last. White Fell questioned of the landmarks of the country and of the Cane Hill, which was an important appointed meeting place at which she was due that night. The house mistress and Sven both exclaimed, Is there 3 long miles away? Sorry. It is 3 long miles away, said Sven, with no place for shelter but a wretched hut. Stay with us the night, and we will show you the way tomorrow. White Fell seemed to hesitate. 3 miles, she said. Then I should be able to see or hear a signal. I will look out, said Sven. Then if there be no signal, you must not leave us. He went to the door. Christian rose silently and followed him out. Sven, do you know who she is? Sven, surprised at the vehement gasp, a low, hoarse voice made answer. She who? White Fell? Yes. She is the most beautiful girl I have ever seen. She is a werewolf. Sven burst out laughing. Are you mad? He asked. No, here, see for yourself. Christian drew him out of the porch, pointing to the snow where the footmarks had been, for now they were not. Snow was falling fast, and every dint was blotted out. Well? Asked Sven. Had you come when I signed to you, you would have seen for yourself. Seen what? The footprints of a wolf leading up to the door, none leading away. It was impossible not to be startled by the tone alone, though it was hardly above a whisper. Sven eyed his brother anxiously, but in the darkness could make nothing of his face. Then he laid his hands kindly and reassuring on Christian's shoulders, and felt how he was quivering with excitement and horror. One sees straight things, he said. When the cold has got into the brain behind the eyes, you came in cold and worn out. No, interrupted Christian. I saw the track first at the brow of the slope, and followed it down right here to the door. This is no delusion. Sven in his heart felt positive that it was. Christian was given to daydream and strange fancies, though never had been possessed with so mad a notion before. Don't you believe me? Said Christian desperately. You must, I swear it's the same truth. Are you blind? Why, even Tyr knows. You will be clear-headed tomorrow after a night's rest. Then come too, if you will, with White Fell to the hill cairn. And if you have doubts still, watch and follow and see what footprints she leaves. Galled by Sven's evident contempt, Christian turned abruptly to the door. Sven caught him back. What now, Christian? What are you going to do? You do not believe me. My mother shall. Sven's grasp tightened. You shall not tell her, he said authoritatively. Customarily, Christian was so docile to his brother's mastery that it was now a surprising thing when he wrenched himself free vigorously and said as determinedly as Sven, She shall know! But Sven was nearer the door and would not let him pass. There had been scarce enough for one night already. Of this notion of yours will keep. Broach it tomorrow. Christian would not yield. Women are so easily scared, pursued Sven, and are ready to believe any folly without shadow of proof. Be a man, Christian, and fight this notion of a werewolf by yourself. If you would believe me, began Christian. I believe you to be a fool, said Sven, losing patience. Another who is not your brother might believe you to be a knave, and guess that you had transformed White Fell into a werewolf because she smiled more readily on me than on you. The jest was not without foundation, for the grace of White Fell's bright looks had been bestowed on him, on Christian, and never a whit. Sven's coxcombry was always frank, and most forgivable, and not without fair colour. If you want an ally, continued Sven, confide in old Trella. Out of her stores of wisdom, in her memory holds good. She can instruct you in the orthodox manner of tackling a werewolf. If I remember all right, you should watch the suspected person till midnight, when the beast's form must be resumed, and retain even after, if a human eye sees the change, or better still, sprinkle hands and feet with holy water, which is certain death. Oh, never feel, but old Trella will be equal to the occasion. Sven's contempt was no longer good-humored. Some touch of irritation or resentment rose at this monstrous doubt of White Fell, but Christian was too deeply distressed to make offense. You should speak of them as old wives' tales. But if you had seen the proof I had seen, you would be ready at least to wish them true, if not also to put them to test. Well, said Sven with a laugh that had a little sneer in it, put them to the test. I will not object to that, if you will only keep your notions to yourself. Now, Christian, give me your word for silence, and we will freeze here no longer. Christian remained silent. Sven put his hands on his shoulders again and vainly tried to see his face in the darkness. We have never quarrelled yet, Christian? I have never quarrelled, returned the other, aware for the first time that his dictatorial brother had sometimes offered occasions for quarrel, had he been ready to take it. Well, said Sven empathetically, if you speak against White Fell to any other, as you tonight you have spoken to me, we shall. He delivered the words like like an ultimatum, turned sharp round, and re-entered the house. Christian, more fearful and wretched than before, followed. Snow is falling fast. Not a single light is to be seen. White Fell's eyes passed over Christian without apparent notice and turned bright and shining upon Sven. Nor any signal to be heard? She queried. Did you not hear the sound of a sea horn? If you want an ally, continued Sven, confide in old Trella. Out of her stores of wisdom, in her memory holds good. Oh, sorry. The page did not turn. There we go. I saw nothing and heard nothing, and signal or no signal, the heavy snow would keep you here perforce. She smiled her thanks beautifully, and Christian's heart sank like lead with a deadly foreboding, as he noted what a light was kindled in Sven's eyes by her smile. That night, when all others slept, Christian, the weariest of all, watched outside the guest chamber till midnight and passed. No sound, not the faintest, could be heard. Could the old tale be true of the midnight change? What was the other side of the door, or a woman or a beast? He would have given his right hand to know. Instinctively, he laid his hand on the latch and drew it softly, though believing that bolts fastened the inner side. The door yielded to his hand. He stood on the threshold. A keen gust of air cut at him. The window stood open. The room was empty. So Christian could sleep with a somewhat lightened heart. In the morning, there was a surprise of conjecture when White Fell's absence was discovered. Christian held his peace. Not even to his brother did he say how he knew that she fled before midnight. And Sven, though evidently greatly chagrined, seemed to disdain reference to the subject of Christian's fears. The elder brother alone joined the bear hunt. Christian found pretext to stay behind. Sven, being out of humor, manifested his contempt by uttering not a single expostulation. All that day, and for many a day after, Christian would never go out of sight of his home. Sven alone noticed how he maneuvered for this, and was clearly annoyed by it. White Fell's name was never mentioned between them, though not seldom was it heard in general talk. Hardly a day passed but little Roll asked when the White Fell would come again. Pretty White Fell, who kissed like a snowflake. And if Sven answered, Christian would be quite sure that the light in his eyes, kindled by White Fell's smile, had not yet died out. Little Roll, naughty, merry, fair-haired little Roll. A day came when his feet raced over the threshold never to return, when his chatter and laugh were heard no more, when tears of anguish were wept by eyes that never would see his bright head again, never again, living or dead. He was seen at dusk for the last time, escaping from the house with his puppy, in freakish rebellion against old Trella. Later, when his absence began to cause anxiety, his puppy crept back to the farm, coward, whimpering and yelping, a pitiful, dumb lump of terror, without intelligence or courage to guide the frightened search. Roll was never found, nor any trace of him. Where he had perished was never known. Now he had perished was known only by an awful guess. A wild beast had devoured him. Christian heard the conjecture a wolf, and a horrible certainty flashed upon him that he knew that wolf it was. He tried to declare what he knew, but Sven saw him start at the words with white face and struggling lips, and guessing his purpose, pulled him back and kept him silent, hardly by his imperious grip and wrath eyes, and one low whisper. That Christian should retain his most irrational suspicion against beautiful White Fell was, to Sven, evidence of a weak obstinacy of mind that would be but thrive upon expostulation and argument. But this evident intention to direct the passions of grief and anguish to a hatred and fear of the fair stranger such as his own was intolerable, and Sven set his will against it. Again Christian yielded to his brother's strong words and will, and against his own judgment consented to silence. Repentance came before the new moon. The first of the year was old. Whitefell came again, smiling as she entered, as though assured of a glad and kindly welcome, and in truth there was only one who saw again her fair face and strange white garb without pleasure. Sven's face glowed with delight, while Christian's grew pale and rigid as death. He had given his word to keep silence, but he had not thought that she would dare to come again. Silence was impossible, face to face with that thing, impossible. Irrepressibly he cried out, "Where is Rahl?" Not a quiver disturbed Whitefell's face. She heard, yet remained bright and tranquil. Sven's eyes flashed around at his brother dangerously. Among the women some tears fell at the poor child's name, but none caught alarm from his sudden utterance, for the thought of Rahl rose naturally. Where was little Rahl, who had nestled in the stranger's arms, kissing her, and watched for her, and prattled of her daily? Christian went out silently. One only thing there was that he could do, and he must not delay. His horror overmastered any curiosity to hear Whitefell's smooth excuses and smiling apologies for her strange and uncourteous departure, and her easy tale of the circumstance of her return, or to watch her bearing as she heard the sad tale of little Rahl. The swiftest runner of the countryside had started on his hardest race, little less than 3 leagues and back, which he reckoned to be accomplished in 2 hours. And though the night was moonless and the way rugged, he rushed again, and still cold air till it felt like a wind upon his face. The dim homestead sank below the ridges at his back. The fresh ridges of snowlands rose out of the obscure horizon, level to drive past him in the stirless air drove, and sink away behind into obscure level again. He took no conscious heed of landmarks, not even when all sign of a path was gone under depths of snow. His will was set to reach his goal with unexampled speed, and thither by instinct his physical forces bore him, without one definite thought to guide. And the idle brain lay passive, inert, receiving into its vacancy restless siftings of past sights and sounds. Rahl, weeping, laughing, playing, coiled in the arms of that dead dreadful thing. Tear, oh tear, white fangs in the black jowl, the woman who wept on the foolish puppy, precious for the child's last touch. Footprints from pine wood to door. The smiling face among firs of such womanly beauty, smiling, and Sven's face. Sven, oh Sven, my brother! Sven's angry laugh possessed his ear, within the sound of the wind of his speed. Sven's scorn assailed more quickly and keen than biting cold at his throat, and yet he was unimpressed by any thought of how Sven's anger and scorn would rise if this errand were known. Sven was a skeptic. His utter disbelief of Christian's testimony regarding the footprints was based upon positive skepticism. His reason refused to bend in accepting the possibility of supernatural materialism. That a living beast could ever be on other than palpably bestial, pawed, toothed, shaggered, and eared as such, was to him incredible. Far more that a human presence could be transformed from its godlike aspect, upright, free-handed, with brows and speech and laughter. The wild and fearful legends that he had known from childhood and then believed, he regarded now as built upon facts distorted, overlaid by imagination and quickened by superstition. Even the strange summons at the threshold, that he himself had vainly answered, was after the first shock of surprise rationally explained to him by malicious foolery at the part of some clever trickster who withheld the key to the enigma. To the younger brother all life was a spiritual mystery, veiled from his clear knowledge by the destiny of flesh. Since he knew his body to be linked to the complex and antagonistic forces that constitute one's soul, it seemed to him not impossibly strange to be one spiritual force should possess divers forms for wildly various manifestation. Nor to him was it great effort to believe that as pure water washes away all natural foulness, so water, wholly by consecration, must needs cleanse God's world from that supernatural evil thing. Therefore, faster than ever man's foot had covered those leagues, he sped under the dark, still night over the waste, trackless snow ridges to the faraway church, where salvation lay in the holy water stoop at the door. His faith was as firm as any that wrought miracles in days past, simple as a child's wish, strong as a man's will. He was hardly missed during these hours, every second of which was by him fulfilled to its utmost extent by extremest effort that sinews and nerves could attain. Within the homestead the while, the easy moments went bright with words of looks of unwonted animation, for the kindly, hospitable instincts of the inmates were roused to cordial expression of welcome and interest by the grace and beauty of their returned stranger. But Sven was eager and earnest, with more than a host's courteous warmth. The impression that at her first coming had charmed him, that had lived since through memory, deepened now with her actual presence. Sven, the matchless among men, acknowledged in this fair white fell a spirit high and bold as his own, and a frame so firm and capable that only bulk was lacking for equal strength. Yet the white skin was molded smoothly, without such muscular swelling as made his might evident. Such love as his frank self-love could conceive was called forth by an ardent admiration for his supreme stranger. More admiration than love was his passion, and therefore he was free from a lover's hesitancy and delicacy, reserve, and doubts. Frankly and boldly he courted her favor by looks and tones, and an address that came of natural ease, needless of skill by practice. Nor was she a woman to be wooed otherwise. Tender whispers and sighs would never gain her ear, but her eyes would brighten and shine if she heard a brave feat, and her prompt hand in sympathy fell swiftly on the axe hilt and clasped it hard. That movement ever fired Sven's admiration anew. He watched for it, strove to elicit it, and glowed when it came. Wonderful and beautiful was that wrist, slender and steel strong. Also the smooth, shapely hand that curved so fast and firm, ready to deal instant death. Desiring to feel the presence of these hands, this bold lover schemed with palpable directness, proposing that she should hear how their hunting songs were sung, with a chorus that signaled hands to be clasped. So his splendid voice gave the verses, and as the chorus was taken up, he claimed her hands, and even though the easy grip fell, as he desired, the strength that was latent, and the vigor that quickened the very fingertips, as the song fired her, and her voice was caught out by the rhythmic swell, and rang clear on top of the closing surge. And that is all for tonight. Have a good night, everyone.